Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Trading 101 on 6 Plus Plus. I am, of course, your host, Tom, very lowest of men, back once again with some trading tips for you. Now, we had a request in the last video, which was a big hit. Thanks, everyone, for supporting that video. And someone asked, can you do an example of a trading unit for every army? And I thought, that sounds really fun. And then I started making that video, and I realized it would be quite long, so I'm going to break them up. So what we're going to do today is shout out one great trading unit for every army, Imperium edition. Okay, there is one Space Marine unit in here, but I'm going to do Space Marines in their own right in the future because there's actually a lot when you start diving into the special flavors of Space Marine as well. So they'll be their own video, and we'll of course do Xenos, Chaos, all that other good stuff too. Before we dive into it, please do hit the old like and subscribe. Please do leave us a comment. It all massively helps the algorithm for us. We're really trying to do big things this year, and your support means the world to us. If you want to sign up, be a YouTube member, chuck us a couple of quid a month so we can keep making wonderful content. We'd really appreciate that too. And of course, if you're interested in leveling up on your favorite army, I do mentoring and coaching via our Discord via 6 Plus. So if you'd like to be taught, I'm more than happy to teach. Okay, so we have got 8 Imperium units for you today. I've selected each of them for different reasons, because if you refer back to our Trading 101 video from last time, if you haven't watched it already, there's a number of different ways to think about and apply trading in your 40k games. And I think different units do different things, work within the trading game in different ways, but each one that I've selected today is a real pest for the opponent to deal with and creates trade situations or trade problems in their own right. I'm not going to work through these in any particular order, but I'm just going to start exploring through. And of course, we'll cover Space Marines and then all the other Imperium factions today, and go in depth on Space Marines properly in the future. If there's things that you've got examples of, if there's things I've missed or things you think would be even better, let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear it. So let's get the obvious one out of the way, the old Space Marines, the Adeptus Astartes. And it is, of course, the humble jump pack intercessor. So JPIs are a wonderful little trading unit. They're obviously especially good in things like Blood Angels or Space Wolves, but they work in almost any detachment. JPIs are a speedy little unit. They have a bunch of attacks. They have a power fist on the sergeant. They have some shooting. They have access to the grenade keyword, and they do a few impact mortals on the charge when they connect into the unit as well. So they are just essentially very good at going out and skirmishing in the early exchanges of a game, dealing with light chaffy units, playing very honest 40k. I fly out, I kill your chaffy thing, then you're going to come and you're going to get me. And Space Marines struggle for cheap things to play the trading game with, but I think the JPI is most flexible, both at going and pushing trades on the opponent, but also then being a sort of a draw-out trade as well. I think they're very good. They're obviously a bit more expensive now than they used to be, and you definitely do see Space Marines players making use of the Invader ATB now in a slightly different way, but I remain a huge fan of the Assault Jump Pack Intercessor, especially because in some of the Space Marine flavors, they can really punch up and trade up well in combat into different things as well. So very well done to the JPI. What a year they've had. They've been all over the place. I still haven't built and painted the 5 that I bought. Maybe I will at some point. Okay, next up, we are going to move it along to the Imperial Guard, the Astra Militarum. And it's a bit of a package deal, this one, because I think the ideal Guard trading unit is actually 2 units, and it is the Catachan in Chimera. So look at those models, aren't they beautiful? You've got the classic, terribly painted Games Workshop Catachans. I really do hope they get a refresh sometime in the future. So Catachan in Chimera is a relatively cheap chassis. You're not paying too many points for a Chimera, and you're not paying too many points for Catachans. They did get little rises recently. But the effect of this puzzle from a trading perspective is that it can scout move, it can push out onto the board and get nestled away somewhere. So then suddenly you've got 20 OC of Catachan hiding inside a genuine vehicle chassis in the Chimera, not the toughest, but still a vehicle chassis, ready to cause problems and score as well. The opponent either has to commit enough to kill both the Chimera and the contents, or they're very likely not going to deny primary. So in a sort of trading perspective, this creates a puzzle. It's also very good because it forces the opponent to use anti-tank solutions, which is going to protect your Leman Russ and other things, because what you can do is bait out anti-tank to kill the Chimera. Then your Leman Russ can respond, destroy their anti-tank. The opponent then has less anti-tank to deal with the Leman Russ. So the Catachan Chimera has always played a really essential role here. It creates a minigame puzzle. It forces out certain kinds of resources. and helps Guard play the game. And of course, it scores for fun and can throw out good OC as well. So I think in the early exchanges, Guard really like using these. I've seen Hydra used in a similar way in recent times as well, but the Kashchan Chimera especially just gets those early exchanges of resources going, forces out more of a bait trade like we were talking about, forcing certain kinds of commitment from the opponent in order to deal with it. Okay, next up we've got the Adeptus Mechanicus, and we've got the Taraxi. Now, there's a sterilizer in this video, but I think people tend to use the other Taraxi, the sort of the gun Taraxi, more than the Flamers for the role I'm thinking about. And this is all about trading for space. AdMech very much have jail potential and blocking potential in their army at the moment. And the beauty of the Taraxi is that they can go really fast, shoot, then fire and fade an additional 6 and push out a block of annoying 2-wound infantry out in front of the opponent. So you're often throwing these away across again, but you are trading for space. AdMech is not the best combat army. It has some combat, but generally it's better in shooting and it's better at scoring. It wants to avoid a situation where it's getting connected to en masse early in the game. So you're often going to throw out the Taraxi. If you can deny primary with them, fantastic, but also you're going to deny space, block off the opponent, get in the way. And you see AdMech do this a lot. Bird Jail is sometimes referred to, and so this is a classic example of a unit that you trade for space really effectively. It's just that little bit cheaper. Obviously, the Flame and Sterilizer ones can also really body things in their own right with their shooting as well, so they can be dangerous, but they are very, very good at throwing away to trade for space by that AdMech time. Let's take it over to the Grey Knights next. So for the Grey Knights, they're not really a trading army in a pure sense, because they, with all their teleporting around, they tend to be more of a sort of gradual clearance type army. But if we were going to shout out a trading unit, I think it's going to have to be the Humble Strike Squad for the Grey Knights. Now, strikes are cheap, not cheap, but cheaper than some of the other stuff you have in Grey Knights. And the advantage with strikes is you can throw strikes away and create a sort of forcing out of the opponent, because strikes sticky objectives. So once strikes are on a point, if the opponent wants to stop you holding it and having to deal with it later, they're going to have to come and kill the strikes. Strikes are also a 2-up save. That's not nothing at all. And obviously there is Armor of Contempt in the original Grey Knights detachment, but in general, they are one of those units that for light skirmish units at the start of a game is actually deceptively hard to clear, can be really, really annoying to deal with. So I've always found strikes are good at forcing out enemy commitment, at which point you can then start counter-attacking and pushing back. Now, as I say, Grey Knights don't love the trading game. That's not a natural one for them, and they're more of a using redeploys around the board and clearing out space and using artillery and indirect now with the new detachment as well. But I do think the Humble Strike does a great job at forcing the issue if you need to get some trading going. Okay, next up, we've got a recent example. It is, of course, the Custos, and the Custos with the Solar Spearhead are having a good time right now. And one of the reasons is this little guy. It's the Custos Contemptor. Ignore the fact he's an Imperial Fist. I couldn't find a Custos Contemptor that I could get the image of. So we've got the Contemptor here. And the Contemptor is our first example in this session of what we call an anti-trade. The beauty of the Custos Contemptor Dreadnought is that the first time he dies, at the end of the phase, he gets back up on a 2-up, with D6 wounds back. Custodies, again, elite like Grey Knights. They're not really a trading army. So how do you force those kinds of problems? Well, you create an anti-trade. You know then, if the opponent genuinely wants to clear the Contemptor Dreadnought off the objective, they either need to give you 2 activations, shooting to kill it and fighting to kill it, or they need to throw OC onto the point. Both of these things can be positives for Custodies. If they've thrown units out to deny the OC, you can then charge off of that and attack. If they have stuck some guns out and stuck some melee out, that's 2 units for you to then reply with your other more dangerous tanks and dreadnoughts, the Caladius, the Telemon, these kinds of things. And ultimately, there is a very real risk that they sink this effort in and then haven't actually killed the Contemptor Dreadnought. So you're seeing Solar Spearhead list pushing 3 of these guys out as the bait at the start. And it's definitely effective. I think it definitely works. It creates that anti-trade problem, and it means essentially the Custodians are playing with more units, which is something they could really do with as a very, very elite army as well. Moving along, we are going to go to the Imperial Agents next, and it is the Subductor. Now, the Subductor is a pesky little guy. He's got a 4-up invuln, so he hides away and is just generally very, very annoying to shift from points. They also have a little Battle Shock ability, so once we're at the start of the command phase, they can select an objective marker and battle shock non-monsters and vehicles around them. So The effect of this is that you've got a slab of wounds with an invuln, which requires quite a substantial effort to clear. If you have not cleared it, the battle shocking effect can then shut your OC off, which means that even if you outnumber them, they're still going to hold the point. So what this does is create huge risk of undercommitment. So for the opponent, they're knowing if I just send one unit and I fail to kill this, and then I fail my battle shock, I'm not taking the point. So I'm not trading for points. I'm not killing the unit. I'm not denying primary. It's a bad trade situation. So they have a choice. Either they overcommit, they send too much, or they take the risk. And I think that's always a good situation in a trading unit. You want something that's going to force the opponent to commit more resources to try and get up in that trading game that we described in the previous video. So love the Humble Subductor. And of course, possibly one of the coolest looking models in 40k. Look at those guys. That's absolutely amazing. Okay. Next up, we've got the Imperial Knights. Now, Imperial Knights might be better borrowing their trading pieces from other armies with Imperial agents, and they certainly can do that now. And I've seen a few people using the Immolator in Dominions, which is quite interesting. But, of course, there is still the Humble Armiger. And it doesn't necessarily matter what type you send for Imperial Knights. The power of the Armiger is that he is OC8. OC8 is very good if you think about the kinds of OC that a lot of armies are able to put on points. Outside of the really sort of stodgy battle line, an Armiger can usually go toe for toe with like solo units and out OC it. They are good bait. Knights are often, again, in a situation where actually trading game can be tricky for them, and often they're going to want to choose a moment to overload with the bigger Knights and use the bigger Knights in a more of an overload situation, which is something we're going to look at down the line. But obviously the Humble Armiger, throw them out. OC8, hard to deal with, always the risk of a rotate ion shield, so the opponent can't just usually commit like one gun tank to clear it. And that's hopefully going to then draw them out onto your other guns to reply. Let's try and get that situation where the big knights have killed off enough of their anti-tank that then they're in a good spot. So using your lighter, cheaper resources at the start to draw some guns out, deal with them. I guess in some ways it's similar to the Guard situation where the Chimera is the early bait chassis. This is an early bait chassis to make sure that your really valuable, expensive, heavy hitters don't get hurt early. Then they can take out the threats to them and you can progress on that basis. Okay, we're nearly done, guys. We've got one more. I wasn't sure how long this would take, but actually that's come out at quite a nice amount. And this one's a real pest. This is the Adeptus Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle. And the one that immediately came to mind to me, and although they have several, is the Canoness. Now, the Canoness is a massive pain in the arse. There are several layers to this. If you play Hallowed Martyrs, you can have a 2-up get back up Canoness using a stratagem, which creates exactly that same anti-trade situation already discussed. So in Hallowed Martyrs, this is already having that same multi-phase problem anti-trade energy. But the other thing with the Canoness is that once per game, they can pop a 2-up invulnerable save, which they are able to reroll. Now, again, this creates a situation where your opponent really can't know what is going to be needed to deal with it. If they can get and focus mortal wounds onto it, but obviously you're going to be trying to hide the Canoness away on the objective somewhere where it's hard to do that, then that helps a little bit. But in general, there is certain armies and certain situations where if you can pick very carefully where the Canoness is used, you know they either have to commit masses of volume to deal with this tiny, cheap character, or, again, multi-phase shooting and combat, because they've got to bait out the invuln in one phase and then kill her in melee. And again, this creates a situation where the opponent just cannot use cheap and cheerful resources to deal with the Canoness. She's not a terrible fighter in her own right either. Doubled down in Hallowed Martyrs with the get back up again. And so this, again, gives Sisters a situation they desperately need right now with their lack of resources, which is the opponent gives you a bunch of stuff to deal with her, and then you can reply with your Castigators and whatever other nasty guns you've got lurking behind the lines. So classic shenanigans from the Sisters, as you would expect. All right, guys, so that is the end of Trading 101 Units Imperium Edition. Let me know what you'd like to see next. I could do Space Marines, I could do Chaos, I could do Xenos. I will do them all eventually. I'm going to keep these coming. And also let me know which units you'd like that I've not managed to cover as well. Were there any that I missed, any really useful ones? I'd love to hear your trading techniques as well. Thank you so much for supporting 6++ this year. Hopefully you'll continue to do so. Please do hit like and subscribe. Please do leave us a comment. And remember that you can sign up to support us as a YouTube member as well if you want to help us go to the moon, which is very much the plan. All right, that's it from me. I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.